the back. Welcome everyone. My name is Rowan Payne. I'm a co-host of this webinar with Sarah Germain. We are very pleased to present to you two speakers, Vivienne Cuff from Archives New Zealand and Cuff N Frean from the Alexander Turnbull Library as part of the National Library New Zealand, Te Puna Mātauranga o Aotearoa. And this is Adventures in Handwriting Recognition. It is a presentation on the Transkribus system. Actually, one small piece of housekeeping. Could everybody just make sure they've got their microphones on mute and probably their video off for the duration. So that is very briefly the topic of the webinar. I will now hand over to my co-host Sarah Germain for an Australian acknowledgement.
Hello everyone, Wominjeka. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia where we live, learn and work. I acknowledge and celebrate the inherent strengths of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and other First Nations peoples and communities and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, sky and culture. I pay my respects to the elders past and present.
Thank you for that. And from New Zealand, kia koutou ngā munga, ngā awa, ngā waka, ngā tupunua Aotearoa me te whenua moe a e hui hui mai nei, tēnā koutou katoa. To you, the mountains, rivers, waka, ancestors of Aotearoa and the land of the dreaming, Australia, that are gathered here, greetings to you all. And we have our chat helper. Thank you, Alexis Tyndall, very much from the chapter coordinating committee. She'll be hanging out in the Zoom chat and mostly keeping track of some of the links that our presenters want to share with you. She'll be posting those as they come up, and we'll try and keep track of any questions that might come up. We do have a question time after the second presentation from Nicola, but we'll hopefully get through to that. Just want to point out this session will be recorded, and it'll be, once it's been edited, it'll be available to you. I believe Ingrid, who does usually does that, will send that out to the participants after sometime after this webinar. So. Without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce Vivienne Cuff from Te Mahara o Te Kāwanatanga, Archives New Zealand. She is going to talk through a couple of handwriting recognition projects, obviously, where she has used Transkribus, and hopefully talk about and demo a few features of Transkribus itself. So I'm going to be sharing Vivienne's presentation, so just bear with me a sec. Sure, I've got the right monitor. There we go. Thank you, Vivienne.
Oh, sorry. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for for coming along. And so what I'm going to do is just talk about Transkribus, and basically it's machine learning, using AI, and you take your digitized records that you've perhaps made digital copies of, and you apply a text recognition and transcription to actually build a model of the handwriting, and then you can then apply that to the rest of the images or pages, whatever, or the letters or that you've got, that that belong to that opus or that set. So it started, Read Co-op started sort of back about 2016, and it's steadily grown in terms of users, and also it's become a cooperative of members. That's just a small group of people who contribute to the development, contribute money to the ongoing work of that group. So it's come out of the University of Innsbruck. So that's the address for it, and there's more on the website than I can possibly talk about. So I think just go there and have a look and see what there is. So next slide, thanks.
Sorry.
Next. So
Got it.
these are just. So if we just play the video, I'm going to play a video. It's a little bit old, but it gives you the overview of Transkribus and sort of how it works. So if we can start that.
How do you find a text in ancient manuscripts and do it fast? Until recently, computers weren't very good at reading handwritten scripts, but now artificial intelligence brings a breakthrough. The Tyrolean State Archive in Innsbruck stores countless documents dating from the 11th century onwards, mostly official records, legal documents, and other important handwritten documents from the past. Transcribing these books isn't easy, but this archive is working with scientists to automate the transcription using cutting-edge computer technologies.
With difficult script like this, I believe the new technique will have problems. But with relatively nice calligraphy like this, the new system has great advantages and helps us a lot.
To digitize such books, scientists working on a European research project, READ, designed a simple-to-use system based on a specially developed smartphone application. It detects when pages are turned and automatically takes
What's happened?
Sorry, it seems to be buffering.
A high-tech app running on a smartphone that's connected to the Transkribus platform. The app uploads the images to the server that performs the recognition of the handwritten text.
Transkribus simplifies tasks that would often take years of work, helping scholars with complex handwriting and unusual layouts. Dr. Mario Clara uses it to describe the 500-page Hero Book, the most significant anthology of medieval German texts, commissioned by Maximilian I in the early 16th century.
The big advantage of this system is that it provides a link between the image and the text, and does it in a very simple way, so the transcriber has the full overview immediately. That's a way to reduce error to a minimum, which can't be achieved with any other system.
Fehler reduzieren, wie es in keinem anderen System reduzieren könnte.
The server at the University of Innsbruck uses machine learning algorithms to teach the computer new writing styles. After users transcribe part of the text manually, the software engine learns to identify the characters and then finishes the task automatically with impressive accuracy.
I'm giving the computer an image and a part of corresponding text, and based on that, the computer can learn this handwriting script and similar fonts.
The system can transcribe text in any language, bringing together scholars and scientists, archivists and volunteers from many countries. The developers are planning to make Transkribus commercially available to users around the world.
We were even surprised by the great success of the project and that so many institutions are in touch with us, expressing an interest. And as we want to continue to offer and expand this service, we're starting a spin-off company.
You can learn more about the Transkribus system on its website or by the link shown on your screen.
Yes, so I just wanted to say the little scan tent thing is quite useful. We've got one, but it's probably quite useful for the people in the reading room if they've got the
Hello?
hello?
Yeah.
Can you? Yeah, I mean the scan tent thing is quite useful because if people have got, say, in the reading room, you know, they could upload to their computer using the app. I'm not sure if it's Apple phones yet, but it was on the other ones, what are they called? Its competitor. Sorry, I just lost me at the minute, but yeah.
Windows.
But, yeah, but the thing basically is, I mean, you could connect up your applications however you do it, and I mean, I get mine off our the General Digital Archive. I can copy those ones that are good enough resolution to use. I mean, I could actually also get the preservation masters if I wanted to do that, which are TIFF files. So, and they can just be uploaded and into Transkribus. So you don't need to use the scan tent, but it's actually quite a useful thing if you were going to do, say, a crowdsourcing project. And as I was saying, the cooperative. So usually the members of the cooperative tend to be institutional type people. So anyway, so just if you can go back on that previous slide. So that's just a kind of overview of it, and there is lots of instructional sort of tutorials and things on the YouTube channel. The 2022 user conference, which was great. There's lots of presentations of different papers on different directions, the new directions they're taking, and also you know, the projects that different people are doing. And if you're really interested in some of the background code, you can find it on GitLab. But at the moment, it uses convolutional neural networks. I won't bore you with the details. But it's moving more to a transformer model. But again, you can look up those and see how the differences and how they work. So next slide, thanks. So the process, I mean, this is the most important part. So as it's said in the presentation, is that you upload your images, and what you have to do is run a tool to find the text regions and the baselines in those images. And that's usually, I mean, sometimes if it's just straight sort of just pages, it's okay. But if there are, say, some structured data or tabulated data, or the way that the volume or the information is set out, you might have to do some thinking first about that and how you segment those pages, and can segment them into, say, 3. You'll see something later where I've done it into 3. There's a top area, a left-hand side and a right-hand side. It's sort of like a T-shape. So basically what you do is you get about 100 pages, and and it's around 15,000 words, and you just transcribe those because you're starting to build up the data for it to create your first model. Now, one of the other things that you probably should be thinking about whilst you're doing it is to look at the archive that you're working with, and what are the images like, what's the handwriting like, what are the characteristics of the handwriting, have you got handwritten text and print combined, all sorts of things, and also the context of who created those records, what you would find in them. One of the things I was working with, Seacliff records, was kind of what I'm trying to do is I've got case books which have many hands in them. There are many doctors who are employed in the asylum, to work with patients. So there are many styles of handwriting, and there's even print. But the first one that I did, it was quite regular handwriting, and quite straightforward, basically. But so if you've got many hands, you can of course make a model perhaps that's peculiar to that series of records. Or you could choose, there are publicly available models in different languages. You've got the train your own model, or you can actually use your own transcripts as well. So instead of actually perhaps doing some transcriptions, is you can load the transcripts you've already got, because I guess in the past, people would have created typewritten or digital transcripts of a particular archive or manuscript. So you can load those up and use those. And it's sort of quite interesting to sort of like look at some of those transcripts that have already been done, because quite often you could check accuracy. You could also check what's actually not there, what hasn't been transcribed, because quite often what people just transcribe are the text. But one thing that I saw, I was trying out, there was a lot of in 19th century correspondence, a lot of sort of numbers and annotations and this sort of thing, and particularly in letters, and that hadn't been transcribed. So you could go back and update those transcripts to perhaps reflect more correctly the actual manuscript or what archive you've got in front of you. So once you've done that, once you've transcribed, say, your 100 pages, is you would go through and check it for its accuracy, because it's really important that it's accurate, because your model is as good as your accuracy. And there's a bunch of states: new, in progress, done, final, ground truth. The other thing that you can do is you can also set up roles. So there's an owner of a collection, there's an editor, a transcriber, a viewer, just a reader. So quite often your transcriber will do the transcribing, but the editor will do the checking to make sure that the transcriptions are correct. Because what you're trying to get is an accurate transcription then to build your model. So you submit the job, and it will process and produce a model for you. And one of the things it will do, it would show you your character error rate. And what we're trying to do is to get under 10% character error rate, so that when you do run your model across the things that it hasn't seen, like you might have done the first 100 pages in your volume, but you've got, say, 200 or 300 more, so that when you run it across the rest of those pages, you've got fairly accurate transcripts that have automatically been produced, and that, again, your staff can go through and just double check and correct. Or you could have you know, a crowdsourcing team. You know, this is where you can involve crowdsourcing sort of projects, so they could do the corrections for you. And also too, you've got some tools to test whether your model is reasonably good. It's not underfitting or overfishing. Overfishing in particular is a bit more problematic, because when it's overfit, it sees it's well trained on what it knows, but what you want it to be is a good model, so that when it sees something it doesn't recognise or hadn't seen before, it actually transcribes with a good degree of accuracy. When you run that to produce those automated transcripts, so there's a bit of a balancing act. Yeah, so yeah, but if you can get something like under 10%, pretty good. Now, because you're sort of like evaluating your model, is you may need more data for training. So you may need to transcribe some more, say another 100 pages or something, just to see if that improves. So it's probably a bit like diminishing returns, as you'll probably get to the point where it doesn't, adding further data doesn't actually improve it that much. But I mean, often you'll have about 2 or 3 goes at just getting your model refined. So then again, often you'll find there are issues with, another thing that the tool does is it will check what is in your transcript versus what it sees. So you can kind of like compare and see how good they are. Now, the other thing that you can do with Transkribus is you can mark up your format, the structure of the documents, and the content metadata. So structure of the documents, like as I was talking before about a T-shaped, so marking that up. Format, you can add in things like strike through, underlining now, which you couldn't when I first started, but you know, all those sorts of, and you can also mark up, you know, when a page has like a photograph in it, or it has diagrams, or it has other things in it. So, and of course your content metadata. So it's fine. There's some basic tags in there, so you can put in person's name and the details, places, that sort of thing. But you can also create your own metadata and you know, add to that, because quite often the texts that you are working with have some perhaps peculiar, well, not peculiar, but they have some specific things about the content that are difficult to put into standard metadata. So for example, like, I mean, I've got one coming up where the outdoor relief casebook describes that the husband has gone up country. Now, where is up country? That means he's left his wife, either just left her, or he's left her to go somewhere to look for work. So that's a term, it's a sort of 19th century term. So you have to kind of think a bit more about it. And the other one too is that once you've got the advantages is once you've got your transcript in a digital format, you can start to look at how you're going to present that. I mean, you might have some initial ideas, and so, you know, and how you're going to present it with the original images that you've been working with. You know, maybe if you just present them as PDFs or JPEGs or whatever, or Word documents, you know, just how you're going to do that. So going back to that context thing is like kind of trying to think through just those requirements and things like metadata and so on as you're going, because it will be a sort of like a workbook that you will update, because as you transcribe and learn more about the content you're working with, you get more insights, you learn more things, you think, oh, perhaps we can do it this way or whatever. I mean, and the other thing that I sort of, I was just going to say about normalised and diplomatic transcriptions, or something in the middle, because when you look at the thing, is you think, well, people are going to read this and search this, so what do I do? And it's probably, in that case, more down the normalised end of things, whereas a more diplomatic would be a more rigorous, so you've got those sort of considerations to think about. And the other one is just like using tools to visualize the content. Do you want to just click on the Voyant link? Thanks. Can you?
Sorry, I'm just trying to do that. Right.
I mean, Voyant is just one of the tools that are around. I mean, there are probably several more. So you can see I've got the outdoor relief casebook, I've got word cloud, different things, different statistical sort of things. So you can imagine, like, if you had a large data set, those insights that you might get from having this sort of analysis would be kind of really interesting and perhaps give you new insights or new research possibilities. So if we can just go back onto the next slide. So if we, next slide. So I think we just to keep it, just to keep to time, is there are links here about the archives I've been working with. As I was saying, the relief casebook, is very regular, and that's sort of what it's about. It's about charitable aid. People apply and they get certain things. The other one is the Seacliff casebooks. Now, this is it's quite a hard thing, because it's, as I said, it's got many hands in it, and I'm trying to sort of just transcribe to build a model, because we've got a whole series of other casebooks. So, and they're currently being digitized, by New Zealand Micrographics. And so hopefully that when they come back, I'll be able to apply my model for those other ones, for the rest of them in that series. So, but I mean, if you just want to continue, next slide. And just talk, I just want to, I'm not going to steal Nicola's thunder, but just, I just worked on the logbook with Sasha, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot from him, and I was amazed, particularly at his research work and interests. But there were some difficulties. It was working with light pencil text occasionally. There were sketches with tabular data and Greek characters. So, and the advantage is here, I mean, as I said, I've been working on the Seacliff casebooks, and one of the people who was the starter, or the initiator of Plunkett, so Frederick Trevor King, he was the medical superintendent before he got involved in public, and Plunkett. So the advantage here is that you've got a model, and I can share this model with others who have archives that maybe his letters, like Alexander Turnbull Library has has records of the Hocken collections here in Dunedin, has records that he's created or written, and so on. So we can be kind of sharing those models with other collections and projects. So you just want to carry on. So in terms of new developments, as I was saying, they have an expert client, which I'll show you in a minute, is a bit daunting, but once you kind of get used to it, it's actually very logical and it works. It's great. What they're trying to do is in something called Transkribus Lite, which is a web-based workbench, and that means to put all those sort of the functionality that the expert client has onto the web. So, and they're doing really well. So I can show you that if we've got time. But I mean, if we don't, we can, yeah. And there's keyword spotting. Well, that's where you don't have to have done transcripts service. So we can do that in transform modeling. And one of the biggest things is buy-in in the organisation, project management, and the funding, because training and running models are charged for. So, and also just how the things are presented, the scope of the work, if you're doing a large collection, and assisting others, and yeah, and managing crowdsourcing, and also integration with, say, your digital workflow software. So, do I have much longer?
I think we might be just about at time there, Vivian. Is there anything particular, last thing that you would like to share with us?
No, but I mean, I just wanted to perhaps show people just quickly that, unfortunately, it's probably, but if I can just share my screen and just show you.
Yeah, go for it. I'll just stop sharing. Thank you.
So quick. And so basically is you've got your images in there, you've done some transcripts, and I've started to, if you have a look, this is the text.
I think we're not, you might not be sharing the right screen there.
What am I doing?
So frustrating with those laptops, trying to find the right place to share, isn't it?
Yeah, can you see it now?
Perfect, got it.
Yep. So this is the case book. This is a transcription. So, like, I mean, we've got these things like addicted to drink or whatever. So what is that? How do you put what kind of metadata? But I mean, we've got places and organizations, so that's sort of more straightforward. The one of the things is the layout. So how it works is you are matching your image text with the words and the kind of coordinates that do it. So all this gets submitted into the program to build the model. So and it's quite straightforward to just, yeah. So just go back to the model and tools. So different tools to do the layout and so on. Text recognition, looking at judging to see how it's going. So view models. So here are all the different models that people have been working on. It's primarily probably European, so there's more, but there are some English models, and I would just look at my models. D265 model. So there you can see what I've done when creating the model is what you do is you create a training set and a validation set. So the training set is much larger, and the validation is that one thing where it sort of tests the model on the validation set just to see how good it is. And you can perhaps see, you know, the character error rate down there is, I think it was, yeah, it's okay. It's better, it's a bit overfit, but it's okay. So, and you can see that I've tried to, you know, redone and create different models. You know, so you can be building on models, and yeah. So, but I'm really happy to kind of talk through all this, you know, perhaps individually or maybe in another session that would concentrate specifically on, you know, using the software and the light interface. So, I mean, if there are any questions, go back to the PowerPoint.
I think we might need to wrap it up there to give Nicola time there. Thanks, Vivian. That is really fascinating. I have so many questions, but we'll have to move on. Thank you so much for that. And I will just hand over to Syra if you want to stop sharing. Thank you.
Oh, there we go, unmuted. Thank you for that, Vivian. Now we would like to pass on to Nicola, who is the leader of arrangement and description at the Alexander Turnbull Library, National Library of New Zealand, Te Puna Mataranga, Aotearoa. She oversaw the investigation into transcription and Transkribus in 2019. So I'll hand over to you, Nicola.
Can you hear me?
Sure can. I'll just share my slides for you.
And thank you very much for managing my slides. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko rākou tāpou te maunga, ko hokianga te mana, ko te rarawa te iwi, ko tāku tāne, ko Reese, ko ngai tūpou tō tūmarae, ko ngā hui a te wharenui, ko Nicola Frean tāku ingoa. Kei te kaiare hi whakahaere me te whakaahuatanga te Puna Mataranga o Aotearoa. Tēnei te whakatoa ki I te tima, kia whakarite, kia whakamārama, kia tauhere ki te ao. So, kia ora everybody. I'm Nicola Frean. I'm the leader of the arrangement and description team at the Alexander Turnbull Library. And it's a great pleasure to be here, although it is casting my mind way back into the past, as 2019 seems now. But I'll do my best to get to do justice to it. And firstly, thank you, and very much acknowledgement and thanks to Archives New Zealand, and especially Vivian for their initiation of this project and the expert input throughout. Also to Dr. Sasha Nolden, who was at that time on the arrangement and description team, and who helped prepare the report, and to Tracy Powell, one of New Zealand National Library's digitisation advisors, with whom I discussed this presentation, although I actually decided, sorry Tracy, to keep it simple. So by way of introduction, my role is to look after the arrangement and description team at the Alexander Turnbull Library, which is the team that processes the unpublished collections. So what we might call the societal archives of New Zealand, which have been donated to the Turnbull Library. That requires making them discoverable and usable with attention to their provenance and original order. So we build finding aids, which are the way by which people find the collections, and we have to incorporate into those a great deal of respect, both for the collections and for their own contexts. So obviously, when this possibility came up to explore the use of Transkribus, we were very excited, while trying to balance it with the core business, which involves a huge backlog, of course. But we were hugely excited because of our role in making connections. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. And that's because handwriting is such a huge part of the collections. Since the library was begun by our first and greatest donor, Alexander Turnbull, we've been collecting huge amounts of manuscript handwritten material. Next slide, please. Thank you. And obviously, we want them to be more accessible. We also know that they are enormously important for the studies of language, in particular for Te Reo Māori. And I'm going to touch on two previous examples of transcriptions in the finding aids, one of which was the McLean Series 2 Māori Letters Inwards to Donna McLean, which comprises about 3,000 letters handwritten to McLean over 1832 to 1876, and in a number of different handwritings. So it's probably the largest surviving accumulation of 19th century letters. It's got no access restrictions on it, but it's not very accessible in reality, and it's not possible to apply any of the wonderful tools of digital humanists to it. So we were excited. We looked to the great projects in the field, of which I think the Transcribe Bentham project was my favourite. And we took into account the fact that handwriting is very hard to read. And these days, many researchers, especially younger researchers, are not accustomed to having to wade their way through handwriting and compare letters to other examples and all of that sort of specialist skill. In fact, one of Sasha's comments I liked was that handwriting is actually a form of inherent vice, like other things which make collections hard to preserve over time and harder to access. Next slide, please. And what people want is this sort of thing. This is actually a fully processed page created by Vivian from our example for the project, so that you can then search it. You can look for the who, the what, the where, the when, and so forth more readily. And you can also do comparisons of language over time. So next slide, please. Thank you. So our example was chosen from recently digitized material at that time, a journal which Alexander Turnbull had himself created in over several years, and which included logs of various journeys he'd taken, one of which was to the pink and white terraces, of which I've put a bit of colour in. So that's the pink and white terraces, which were subsequently destroyed, of course. So the thought of Turnbull himself going there was quite exciting. Next slide, please. What we did was to give Sasha a certain amount of time to work on it. And he became familiar with the Transkribus documentation, huge support in the conference proceedings and documentation that was available, as well as Vivian's expertise. And Sasha had German as well as English in his toolkit, so he was able to watch some of the material and access that in German as well as in English. So was a hands-on approach using this one journal, which had been digitized, which had 128 pages, 146 pages, which was digitized as 159 images. Some of the things that Vivian mentioned were seen as challenges, but we wanted to see how it would pan out. So it had ruled pages, it had pencil and ink, it had a variety of handwriting over time. It had tables in it and lists of data, including latitude and longitude and costs of traveling around. It had some sketches, and it had actually a couple of passports laid in at the back. So the word count was about 20,000 words altogether. And we followed the process which Vivian has described, and I've put some examples there. I'm not going to go into detail, but the process of uploading, the segmentation, manual transcription. I think we ended up with 3 data sets, and we got the character error rate down to 10%. So it worked. We were pleased. And the sort of surrounding technology was a little more challenging. For some reason, we decided to upload the TIFFs. I think we thought that would make for a better image from which to transcribe, particularly the ones in graphite pencil. The process of getting the TIFFs, uploading them, involved quite a bit of delay. In the end, I bought a thumb drive, and NDHA, our National Digital Heritage Archive, downloaded the images, and we uploaded them, and that all worked. They also had to enable Java on Sasha's machine. The technical services people had to get involved in allowing that to happen and checking security and so forth. We found that the wireless connection didn't work so well, but when we were connected to the network through a docking station, there was no problem, and we were able to do everything that the project required. So and then at the end, we were able to export. We focused on 2 of the range of export options. There was one .x export, which was a very usable file for preservation and future utilisation of the transcription. And we also experimented with the PDF export, which incorporated all 159 page images along with the transcription, which was a very large file and too large for easy transmission in our system, but would have been good for a scholar viewing the source text and the transcription side by side. So it worked. We were pleased. Next slide, please. So this is an excerpt from my report afterwards. And the first question I grappled with was whether it was actually in scope for my team or for arrangement and description. And I decided that it was, because the goal is to make it easier for users to connect with collections. And in this respect, transcription is another form of surrogate for the original item. So in our systems, we have the original logbook. We have the digitized logbook with its various pages tied together in one complex intellectual entity. We have potentially transcriptions of the pages, and then potentially again, say, translations. So I thought it was in scope for, broadly speaking, for arrangement and description and finding aids to the collections. Next slide, please. The second issue that I grappled with was integration of presentation. So I thought we needed to do a lot of work about this. It's a kind of classic case of needing to work in partnership. What we have at the moment is the NDHA viewer, which could include annotations, and the papers passed framework, building off OCR. We hoped that there would be more work done on this. It's a slow process, what can I say? But this slide shows also an example from the McLean series, which I mentioned earlier, as it appears online. So this is not somebody having to work through Transkribus. This is our finding aids online for digitized surrogates. So on the left is a letter as it appears in NDHA, and you can see it's got some metadata around it. It's got a sidebar with a menu for the different pages that is all linked to from our digital finding aid about the collection. So it contains the metadata about what the item is and the collection that it sits within. On the right, we have an earlier an earlier transcription model, which was a wonderful project called MR, which was to transcribe and translate the series to Māori letters to McLean. And that had come to us in digital form. We'd thought long and hard about how to do this, but we eventually decided that we would separate the individual PDFs and attach them to the original letters that they related to. So you can't read it, but that single PDF contains both a transcription and below it a translation. So it's interesting because the project as a whole also had some documentation which we were able to describe, and that has some really interesting information in it about how the transcriptions were done by a variety of people, starting from microfilms as well as from the originals. Next slide, please. So that integration and presentation, I thought, was an area for future work, because we were not going to expect our clients to actually be working in Transkribus to search material. I can't remember where I am. Thirdly, I think. Thirdly, talking about rights. So because in New Zealand a copy doesn't acquire a new copyright of its own, it is a surrogate, it's a replacement for the original item. So the rights attaching to the original item should be carried through for the surrogate. Transcription, therefore, isn't, strictly speaking, metadata, but a surrogate. Our metadata is licensed under a Creative Commons license, but it might be that transcription of an original item which had copyrights or rights of different kinds attached to it would need to consider those. So one of the actions resulting from our project was that we were supposed to review the rights metadata for items where transcriptions were already included in metadata. And this is one of them in the images below this slide. This is one of a number of letters which were donated to the library because they had been rolled up and put into an old tobacco tin The tobacco tin was sold in a second-hand shop, and its excited purchaser opened it up and found bonus letters which came to the library. And so we had no idea where they had come from originally, or what the letters, which were all in Te Reo Māori, had to do with. So in that case, we had to transcribe the material in order to carry out arrangement and description. And we felt that having added the value and done the work of doing that, we wanted to be able to make that available to researchers as well. So in that case, we did include the transcription in the metadata. So the third slide along is a shot from our website, and you can see the transcription there. So yeah, just getting to grips both with the way that things present or can be presented, and with what's involved in presenting the context around them was very important. And subsequently, the library has put a good deal of thought into how we are going to undertake those principles, particularly in relation to the care and preservation of Māori materials. If I can put that in the chat. I don't think I can send it through, sorry. But there is a sorry. There you go. There is and there are a number of ways in which rights other than purely copyright can be and should be addressed for cultural institutions. And the library has been thinking about those in the intervening period. At the moment, we have a cultural considerations statement under consideration. We've looked at the rightsstatements.org work. We've looked at traditional knowledge labels, although that comes from the group, the communities involved. So so that's quite apart from any rights that might accrue to Transkribus itself. At the point that we were involved, it was in the initial stage where it was not yet commercial. So next slide, please. So finally, I wanted to really stress the opportunities for partnerships that I think this transcription, certainly in Transkribus, is one example of it, present. I think traditionally we've had a sort of silos of excellence model, and this really requires us to work together across teams. Just within the library, we had the National Digital Heritage Archive involved. We had the curatorial digital collections, imaging services, and arrangement and description teams. We had the community from Transkribus, and then I presume there was also a similar group lining up behind Vivian in Archives New Zealand to enable her work. And I think I also mentioned the need to involve the technical services support, which in our case is from the Department of Internal Affairs. So I think that doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it challenging for our environment. Why I was strongly reminded of another project we had tried to explore, which is also to do with machine learning, I guess, which was a facial recognition project involving out of copyright carte de visite put onto a social platform where people could say whether they thought that was the same person, whether whether it was the same face as another face. So I think I can see Transkribus working in a kind of pipeline where we use it to create a transcription, and then we invite and involve a community, perhaps crowdsourcing, to validate and verify the transcription and figure out how to put it up and make it available. Maybe you're further ahead than I am with that, Vivian, and of adding it to your
same issues. Yeah, we've got the same issues.
Yeah. Well, what my solution would have been, I think, is to add the transcription to the NDHA digital objects associated with an item. So as well as those links to individual pages, at the foot maybe you would have a link to a transcription, and that would have all of its metadata around it, but it doesn't really present very well. So so just to sum up, I guess, looking for ideas and support from AI for LAM. I think this is a really, really exciting proposal, or certainly it was a great trial for us. In the end, I decided that we weren't going to go further with it because we had core business in collections that didn't have any discoverable descriptions at all on the internet for our research communities, and that was where our energy should be going. But I do think it is enormously promising for a cooperative and partnership approach. Looking forward to discussions and questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Nicola, so much. We are at time. Thank you so much to Vivian and Nicola. Thanks for your questions, Beth, Jenny, and Claire. I've taken note of them, and I will forward them on, and we'll get back in touch with you. Thanks for that. Because we're at time, I'll just quickly wrap up. And one final thank you to our speakers and to my co-host Sarah Germain, and also to Alexis, who's been posting all the information on the chat. Thank you so much for that. So a couple of things about the chapter. We have a site which Alexis is putting in the chat there, and Slack workspace. So we're really keen for, it's all volunteers, of course, and we're very keen to hear about stuff to showcase and new webinars, and also for people to help us organize things. It's tricky to work around a day job. And finally, just one word of news: the Fantastic Futures Conference, which is put on by AI for LAM, the kind of mothership AI for LAM, is happening in Vancouver, Canada in November this year. We're yet to confirm a host, so just keep a lookout for that Fantastic Futures Conference. And also this webinar, as Alexis pointed out, will be available on our YouTube channel once it's been edited. That's us. Thank you.
Thank you all.